to us. I just want us to know that we have outlawed any kind of theological perspective that COVID is mark of the beast and the vaccine is the mark of the beast. We are not there. We are not there at all. We are past that place a long time. We're on this platform. We promote the fact that COVID is a factor of the end time development and end time situation. That's absolutely not on for any of us. And so we just want you to know that we stop that now. COVID is COVID, and it is one of those things that has hit the world. We have initially, we had to be responsible and do theological investigation on the whole thing, and we have found nothing to suggest that COVID is a mark of the beast or the beast, and the vaccine certainly, taking the vaccine is not subscribing to the mark of the beast. You know by now that most of the prophets are getting it kind of wrong, so don't get caught up in that. Don't look for any, a wicked and perverse generation look for a sign. Don't look for those kinds of signs. The Bible is very clear on what are the signs of the coming of the Lord. And in fact, from our theological position, if this was indeed mark of the beast, we would not be here, because by our theology, the rapture takes place before the beast comes in place to implement the 666 system. So that's what we get it very clear. In fact, you can join us on Bible study on Thursday night, and we will talk some more about that if you care to. I'm sure that Reverend Tash would be happy to entertain a question or two on the matter about where we stand now. When COVID started, we heard that it was a result of 5G, and God was punishing the world and the United States of America and certainly Jamaica. And then, of course, 5G rained out as the cause of it. And then people realized that 5G thing was just not on. Nonsense. It starts somewhere there. I think it is still believed that epicenter is somewhere in China. And then when we prayed about a vaccine, although what my prayer was all about long time, that supernatural intervention, international cosmic intervention, which is not impossible for God. But God chose not to do that, at least not yet, if he will. No prophecy. I just know that God is able to do exceeding abundantly above that which you can ask or think. And the same way he can do other things, create this world, he can do that too. But he chooses not to. But vaccine is in the place, and we are responsible promoting vaccine. And on that basis, we are answering the questions you have on vaccine, not the theological questions. Theological questions are not going to be entertained because we don't decide that it is not a theological phenomenon. It's a biological phenomenon, it's a social phenomenon, it is a medical phenomenon, and we are going to be going up that street to answer some of your questions. But as far as we are concerned, we are convinced from all theological perspective and from all major religion and theology, it is not the mark of the beast. So don't bother get to, if you get any revelation, otherwise we know which God you which God is serving, not the one that we serve on this platform. But get serious, get as them boys out of road, get big and serious. Rule out that thing and don't talk that thing anymore about it being the mark of the beast, because it is not. And just practically speaking, just about where the beast would come from. Who would be the beast? Would it be Biden, or was it Trump and now Biden? Would it be the Russian president? Would it be the British Prime Minister? Would it be, which superpower would give rise to the beast? That doesn't make any sense. So let us talk seriously. Many of us, or many of you have taken the vaccine already. I have not yet so gone, but shortly I shall. So let us indeed pause now, and before we introduce Dr. Figueroa to come and open his camera and speak clearly to us, the man at the forefront of things, let me ask Reverend Marsha to introduce a profile of this distinguished Jamaican who is now take center stage as it relates to COVID.
Good night again. Dr. J. Peter Figueroa is a professor of public health, epidemiology, and HIV/AIDS at the University of the West Indies, Kingston, Jamaica, where he has developed a doctorate. He has developed a doctorate program in public health. He was formerly the Chief Medical Officer at the Ministry of Health, and for many years, the Chief Epidemiologist and Director of the National HIV/STI Program in Jamaica, and a Scientific Secretary of the Caribbean Health Research Council. He has represented the government of Jamaica on regional and international health-related agencies and conducted consultancies in the Caribbean, Africa, and the Middle East. As the head of the Caribbean Immunization Technical Advisory Group, Professor Peter Figueroa has added his voice to the calls for Jamaicans to support and take the coronavirus vaccine, which is now being administered by the Jamaican government. Please help me make welcome Dr. Peter Figueroa.
Okay, good night.
Good night, Doc. How are you doing?
I am fine.
Good
Thanks
night,
for that
doctor.
very kind introduction.
Welcome.
I just want you to know that you're talking to an audience of large Jamaicans, but we have others from the diaspora, Jamaican diaspora, who is in fact in on you tonight from all over the world. And they are with us on the Tuesday night at Christian Hard Talk, where we take on the hard topics. And I've looked if they are going to stone me after this, but so tonight they're going to have less stones for me and for both of us. So they finish telling them about the vaccine tonight. So it was a pleasure to have you, sir. And you know, we go way back, and you don't remember, but I remember from the 80s when the AIDS time, when the AIDS epidemic was rough. But it's a pleasure to have you. And tonight we're looking forward to hear just a lot of what you have in store for us. Let us begin at the beginning. When did this all begin, Doc? When did we get here? How did we get here?
Yes, well, it was in late December of 2019 that in the city of Wuhan in China, they observed a cluster of persons in hospital who had pneumonia. And it wasn't quite the usual pneumonia. So they were wondering what was going on. And when they investigated, they noticed that most of the persons used to frequent the food market in Wuhan. And this is where they identified, the Chinese scientists, then isolated from a number of those patients the coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus causes the common cold, as do some other viruses. But this coronavirus was causing a pneumonia that was causing quite a number of persons to die. And it spread rapidly in Wuhan. And the Chinese, in investigating, thought that perhaps this was a virus that came from bats, wild bats, and somehow got into some of another mammal, another animal that persons were then exposed to at this food market. And I think everybody else knows the story from there, where it spread right across the world. And we've now had over 140 million persons infected. In fact, that is an underestimate. Those are just persons who are confirmed cases. There are many others. We have over 3 million deaths. And in Jamaica, we have over 43,000, nearly 43,000 cases. Again, that's an underestimate of the real number. And we now are approaching 700 deaths. So this is a serious problem.
Underestimate of the real number. Why did you say that, Doc?
Well, because remember, as we found out soon, is that while many persons get sick and they may develop a cough fever, headache. They may lose a sense of taste, smell, and some of them have to go to hospital with pneumonia, difficulty breathing, very serious problems breathing, and some die. We know that there are many persons who get much milder symptoms and are never diagnosed as having COVID, and some persons get infected with the virus and don't have any symptoms at all. So we don't understand fully why some people don't show any signs of the disease, others get a mild disease, and others get a serious disease. What we do know, though, is that the older you are, once you're over 70, if you get COVID, you are at much higher risk of getting severe COVID and have to be hospitalized. And unfortunately, you run the risk of death.
Why a vaccine? I mean, we have heard in recent news about persons finding the cure for, persons saying that if they treat it with something that they have discovered, especially I think Australia, then persons within 5 days of your blood pressure or your blood oxygen level don't fall below 50, then you are cured. There are many talks about cure, but the emphasis is on vaccine. Why vaccine because of this finding a cure?
Well, you know, we don't, the treatment for COVID has been a challenge. If you have a mild case of COVID, it's not a problem. You can take 2 Cetamol, 2 Panadol, rest for a few days, and you recover. But if you have severe COVID and you need to admit to hospital, then what we find is that the oxygen saturation in your blood, which is normally anywhere from 97 to 99%, that can go right down. If it goes down to 93% or less, you're going to have difficulty getting adequate oxygen. And some people go right down into the 80%, in the 80s, oxygen saturation. I mean, I had a patient where they came to my practice. Her brother brought her and said she just don't look right. And when I did the saturation, it was about 88%. I sent her to KPH, and within 1 week, unfortunately, that lady was dead. Because the treatment, we give them steroids, we give them antibiotic, we give them oxygen, but there are some special medications that they're working on, but we don't have a ready treatment. The way that you can, for certain things, get an injection, get antibiotics, and you're almost 90% sure that it will clear up. With COVID, we don't have a good treatment. Initially, the only thing we had was wearing of the masks because it is spread through droplet spread. People, if they're in close contact, then when you talk, sing, or just breathe, you're going to have the virus coming out with your spit and your breath, and it can expose someone who breathes that in to getting ill. So we only had what we call the non-pharmaceutical measures, the masking, you wash your hands, maintain the physical distancing, avoid crowds, especially indoors. And then, of course, they went to work right away on the virus. Now, many people on the vaccine, many people wonder how come we get the vaccine so quick. I don't know if you want us to discuss that.
Yes, man, that's exactly where I'm going. Vaccine, so in fact, somebody saying is this is not a vaccine. It is something like a vaccine, but not a vaccine. So go right into the vaccine for us.
Okay, so I don't know if you remember, in 2003, we had a scare with SARS in the Far East, where certain people were developing a severe acute respiratory syndrome in Hong Kong, and 1 out of 3 were dying. And it spread right over to New York, Europe. It didn't actually come to Jamaica, but the fatality rate was high. That was caused by a coronavirus. So at that time in 2003, they started working on trying to get a vaccine against SARS. Then in 2012, another coronavirus that was transmitted by camels in the Middle East was infecting people. So this gave another impetus to try and develop a vaccine, because people were worried, the scientists were worried, we may get another thing like SARS. And then when we get COVID now, and the Chinese scientists, what they did is they sequenced the genetic code of that coronavirus, the genetic code that sort of rules the virus. And the scientists who were working on the SARS vaccine, they just changed the genetic code, how they set it in the vaccine that they were working on against the SARS, and to make it work against the coronavirus that causes COVID. And they put it immediately, almost within weeks, into animals, and then they put it into healthy adults to test it, to see whether it was safe, whether it could encourage the body to form an immune response to protect you from the virus. And then they put it into trials with thousands of persons. Now, in these trials, what they do is, let's say you take 30 to 40,000 people, you give half or more of the people an injection with the vaccine, and then the other half, you give them an injection with saline, no vaccine is in it. And you compare now, you follow them for several months, preferably up to a year, and you observe who gets ill with COVID. If the vaccine is effective, what you'll find is the people who got the saline only and didn't get the vaccine, those are the people getting the COVID. And the persons who get the vaccine are the ones now who are protected. Very few of them get COVID. And that is how they work out the efficacy. That is how they know that some of the vaccines have 70% efficacy, 80, 90% efficacy. And they also monitor very, very closely. People have to keep a diary of anything that happens to them, headache, fever, any illness, much less if they die. And you compare the people who get the saline only and those who get the vaccine to work out, is this vaccine safe?
Okay, Doc, I'm going to ask you about the whole business of human fetus being a part of being a part of the vaccine, DNA, RNA, all these kinds of structure. But Doc, how you know so much? You're here in Jamaica. This thing is happening. I don't understand it. Man, Bill Gates get you to bamboozle us, because we hear that Bill Gates targeting some Jamaican, including the Prime Minister, to bamboozle us and get us to take COVID because they want to make a big money off of it. Tell us how you know so much first, then you can tell us about it.
Yeah, this is a good question. Now, remember, you have any idea when I graduated from medical school?
The 70s.
Yeah, it was 1972, right? So, and then I went on to do my public health, and I worked in the ministry most of my career.
Yes.
And then I went in the late 1980s, I went to London School of Hygiene and did my PhD, and came back to Jamaica, finished off the PhD. And for a long time, I have been involved in research in Jamaica. I've been involved in a lot of technical meetings over the years. So from the 1990s, I was a member of what they call the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts, who looked at different vaccines and vaccine preventable diseases at the World Health Organization. And then you only serve 2 terms, 2 3-year terms. That was 6 years. And then I went on to the polio advisory group, and I chaired both the polio group and the measles group. And then I went back onto the SAGE in about 2008 and served another 6 years. And right now I'm on the working group, the WHO working group for COVID vaccines.
Oh.
But I've been involved in immunization for a long time, because what most people in Jamaica are familiar with is the childhood vaccination.
Yes.
And I've been chair of what we call the Immunization Managers Group for the Caribbean. I've been the chair for that since about 1989. And then I joined the PAHO Technical Advisory Group for Immunization in 1992. And I became the chair of that maybe about 5 or 8 years ago. I can't even remember. I've just lived in the immunization world internationally.
Yeah, somebody told me that the man in the Caribbean to talk to, the guru on vaccine and immunization in the Caribbean is you. And I have a feeling them talking the truth. But your information on vaccine as it relates to COVID, how do you gather? Who supplies you with this information?
Right. Well, this is remarkable, because for the first time ever, you know, the scientific community, the medical scientific community has literally several hundred medical journals. And for COVID, because it is a pandemic, every single scientific article that goes into the medical literature is available to anyone who wants to get it. So all the leading journals have scores. So I am spending maybe 2 hours a day minimum, sometimes 3-4 hours reading everything that comes out on COVID. I have maybe 3 meetings a week, usually starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, which are WHO meetings where they have international experts from all over the world discussing different aspects of COVID. This morning, there was a doctor who presented the experience of giving the vaccines in the UK. And it's fascinating, because remember, when the UK started to vaccinate, they said they're going to give more people 1 dose rather than 2 doses.
Yeah.
And there were some scientists who said, but the studies show you must give 2 doses. Why are you giving 2 doses? So we spent 2 hours looking at the data, and the British have been vindicated. I remember when they took the decision. It works out that when you look at their curve to do with deaths, it has come down much more dramatically than that in the United States. Because the more people you get vaccinated, 1 dose of the vaccine gives you approximately 70% protection.
Wow.
1 dose.
Yes.
And 2 doses gives you about 90% protection against severe COVID.
Good. I would ask you to speak about efficacy, but before we do that, I just want to tell our audience that yes, on the issues of life, Doc spends at least 2 hours a day preparing himself to save life. We who believe in eternal life, we don't spend so much time grasping the material, you know. Holy Ghost, talk to you. Anyway, sir, tell us about the fetus, the composition of vaccines in general.
Yeah.
Talk about and so, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so now when you have a virus and you isolate it, let's say, either from a human, because you may do tests. Now, of course, for the coronavirus, you stick this swab in the nose and then you take it to the lab, you isolate it. How do you keep that virus alive? You either have to put it into an animal, or you find some live cells that will keep growing and growing and growing in the lab. So what they did many years ago is that there were some scientists who took some fetal cells, and those cells, because they're young, healthy, they keep multiplying, they grow in the lab, so they stay alive. If you take my cells, they mightn't last that long, I'm just dead off. But anyway, so they took these fetal cells, and over time, those cells were able to sustain certain viruses in the lab. So you could do experiments. They did other things. They took things like the cells from monkeys' kidneys or cells from other animals. So this is why historically in the lab, you have certain cell lines where they can grow the viruses and test them in the lab. Because if you can't grow them in the lab, it's difficult to do any experiments with them. Now, the way they've done with those fetal cells now is those fetal cells, you know, they're now laboratory cells, if you follow what I mean. So even if you grow something in them, anything you take from them now, you have to put through a purification process if that is going to come into the human body. Anything that goes into the human body that is grown in the lab, it has to go through a very serious purification process. So you don't have any fetal material in the vaccine itself. Some vaccines are grown in other cells, monkey cells, liver cells, kidney cells, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And some vaccines, for instance, the hepatitis vaccine is manufactured synthetically through chemical reactions. So it's synthetic.
Good. I paused with that bread for a while because I really didn't want to know that I was aborting baby and putting it in and giving it to me Christian pastor.
No, that's not done now. That's not done now.
How does it work? Because there are those who are saying that it is really not a vaccine. In fact, like the usual vaccine that we know about, that develop your immune system, give you a small dose of the thing. I understand that this one doesn't do exactly like that. What's the nuance and difference?
Okay, so what we call this approach now, they call it different platforms. So most people know the polio vaccine, the polio drops. Now the polio drops is made by taking the polio virus, and there are 3 polio viruses, and they grow it in the lab repeatedly in a cell line until it gets weak. It gets weak, it's still alive, so that virus can still multiply. And they put it in the drops, and they give the baby the drops, and each baby gets 3 sets of drops between, let's say, at about, it varies, sometimes 2, 4, 6 months, and then another dose at 18 months. And that protects you against getting polio. That is the live attenuated polio. So that is the virus itself that is made so weak that it doesn't give you a disease. But they also can take the polio virus and they can kill it. So they kill it in the lab and they turn it into an injection. And now we are using that polio vaccine that's an injection as well as the polio drops. So that is a traditional type of vaccine.
Okay.
No, but there are other types that are being developed because the very aim of a vaccine is simply when we get sick, like when I was a boy, I actually got measles. So I was sick with measles and I developed natural protection against measles. And I did not get the measles vaccine. And I've never caught measles again because the protection is lifelong. At the same time, as a young doctor, and you probably remember, there were times when we had hundreds of children sick in Bustamante Children's Hospital, many of them dying from measles. But by giving the measles vaccine when they're young as babies, we give them an injection with the virus that is weakened considerably, and it protects you for life. So what we are getting is not the strong germ into our body. We are getting either the killed germ or a piece of the killed germ or something in the lab that takes like a little protein that is similar to a part of the germ, and that is injected into the body, and the body now reacts to that and produces what we call antibodies as well as cells that can recognize what you've put into the body. The thing that you've put in your body mimics the germ. So your body now learns how to recognize the germ. And when the germ comes, the body can recognize and control it.
Amen.
We're not always successful.
I realize that. You are listening, in fact, you are in tonight on Christian Hard Talk, where we ask the hard questions and issues confronting people in the church and otherwise. Tonight, we are confronting the issues on COVID-19, that pandemic that is wreaking havoc in the world. And with us tonight is Professor Dr. Peter Figueroa, the guru on epidemiology and other vaccines and everything in that whole discipline, and is the man to talk to. And we have him live tonight, and we are going to really just put him to the test. The questions are raging, Doc, and yes, and the first one maybe that we want to ask tonight is the vaccine. We take it, but we still have to be wearing masks, we still have to be sanitizing, and you still can catch it a second time. What's the use? Why don't we all just prepare to die?
Okay, so this is a really important question. So right now, the vaccines that we have, we say that they're effective and they're safe. They're effective in protecting you against getting COVID. They're not 100%. There is very little in life that is 100%. So, but where they are very good is that they protect you against severe COVID. So now, these vaccines protect you from disease. However, remember, there are certain people who can get the germ and they get ill. There are others who get the germ and they don't show any signs of illness. So when you get the vaccine, it protects you from disease, from COVID. But we don't know yet. In fact, we do know that not everyone who gets the vaccine is protected from the germ, from being infected with the germ. So they can still get the germ, but they don't get no disease usually. Sometimes they get just a mild disease. They don't get severe disease. So the vaccines we have do not protect you fully from getting infected. So this means that you could have no symptoms, you're protected from getting the severe COVID, but you could have the germ that caused COVID, the coronavirus, and you could pass that on to someone who has not been vaccinated, could pass it on to a family member, a friend, an elder who gets sick and could even die from it.
So the question is, again in the room, coming to the room, Doc, what if you're asymptomatic and take the vaccine? What if you already caught COVID, you're COVID infected and you don't know you take the vaccine? What are the...
Yeah, it won't hurt you at all. It won't hurt you at all. It doesn't cause any problems. If someone does have COVID and they're sick with COVID, then we say, okay, first recover from the COVID before you get the vaccine. But once you get COVID, we are finding that persons who have had the disease, they develop natural immunity and protection against being reinfected for at least 6 months. A minority occasionally there's an individual who has had COVID and they get it again. And we don't know if that's that they're getting a different variant, a different strain, or that they just have something in their immune system that is a weakness. But most people are protected naturally. So what we're saying is, if you've had COVID and you've got a confirmed test that you had COVID, you don't need to get the vaccine until maybe 4 to 6 months, and just take one dose as a booster to the natural immunity that you have.
This is the frightening part of it, no doubt. That's going to shadow some person that on this platform. Can you specifically say that persons with certain comorbid conditions or severity of the particular condition are to stay away from vaccine? Can you predict a heart condition, a swollen heart, has a heart attack, pacemaker, diabetes stage 1, 2, or 3, temperature, high blood pressure? Or is there a predisposed condition that you would say to that person, do not take the vaccine?
Yeah, there are very few persons who we would tell them, don't take the vaccine. So let's look at some of these. People with hypertension, diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, all of these are comorbidities. This means that these people are at more risk of getting severe COVID or having complications from the disease. So it is more important for these persons to take the vaccine. The vaccine does not in any way disturb their underlying condition of hypertension or heart condition or kidney condition. So it is important that they take the vaccine. The persons who should not take the vaccine are the following. If you are acutely ill with a serious illness, it's better that you recover from that illness first, because your body's immune system is already having its hands full trying to get you better over the condition you have. So get better from that condition and then you take the vaccine. That's one. If you have cancer and are undergoing chemotherapy, or there are certain other kind of conditions where we use chemotherapeutic agencies that weaken your body's immune system, then we say, don't take the vaccine, wait till you recover or you're in a stable situation, and then you take the vaccine. But persons who have HIV, they can take the vaccine. If they're on treatment, they're good. Even if they're not on treatment, unless they're severely ill, they should take the vaccine. So those are the persons. So for most people, they should take the vaccine.
Doc, looking at a question in the room, the matter of the different strains of vaccine. If we are told that the COVID-19, that we started out with one strain, but I think we're about 3 strains up now. How do we use the same vaccine to quit that strain? Tell us about the different strains, the different vaccine. How frequently will we have to be taking vaccines and so on? Will we ever be cured of vaccine?
This is a really important question. Now, remember, we're just learning as we go along. I mean,
we're just guinea pigs.
Sorry?
We are just guinea pigs as we go along.
No, man, don't say we are guinea pigs. but we are studying the situation closely, to see, and doing experiments and trials, clinical trials, because remember, we have to get better treatment and we have to have effective vaccines. So we have to be doing the research all along. So we are learning. But the first virus, the virus that came, the coronavirus, the initial coronavirus that was spreading, what we find is, remember, a virus multiplies itself thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times. So in a very short period. So it multiplies itself so frequently that mutations develop. Mutations are just small changes in the genetic code of the virus that may give it different characteristics. So mutations are occurring all the while. I'll refer very briefly to the influenza virus. The influenza virus, the flu virus that we know about. All of us get flu regularly, right? But we now have vaccines against flu that we're encouraging adults to take, especially the elderly, the very young, the pregnant, and persons with comorbidities, because it helps to protect you. Many people, thousands of people die from flu every year. But if you take the flu vaccine, it's not a superb vaccine, but it definitely reduces your chance of having severe flu and dying from it. So I take the flu vaccine every year. And why is it every year? Because it mutates so much that you get different variants of the flu. So every year we have to produce a new vaccine, although we're trying to find a vaccine that will be able to recognize different flus, even if they mutate, but we don't reach there yet. So when it comes to the coronavirus now, the one that causes COVID, it mutates as well, but it does not mutate as rapidly as the flu virus. So we have three variants that we are concerned about. We had the original germ, the original coronavirus, and that is what was used to develop the vaccines. Then we got a variant coming out of South Africa, one coming out of the UK that came to Jamaica as well, and another one coming out of Brazil. Now, variants are coming up all the time, but most of them are either too weak, or they die out, or they don't cause too much disease. But these three that I'm talking about, they are stronger. They transmit more readily. They are more infectious, and they're the ones that cause the surge. The UK one caused a hell of a surge towards Christmas and after in England, Europe, and is now in the US causing a problem. The one in Brazil nearly decimated some of the original native people in the Amazon. And the one in South Africa is causing a problem. So far, the vaccines, when they test it in the lab, they seem to be largely effective against the current variants. But we are concerned, we have to monitor that another variant doesn't come up that the vaccine is not as effective against. So we have to monitor that.
You're on Christian Hard Talk tonight, the head of the Caribbean Immunization Technical Advisory Group, Professor Dr. Peter Figueroa, also Professor of Public Health, Epidemiology, and HIV at University of the West Indies. Doc, at first when we took the vaccine, we were told that in 20 days it's time for the boosters. Now people are getting 2 months and 3 months referral for the boosters, and it is running out. And I'm kind of afraid that it might be 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. I'm wondering if there can be such a time between the first vaccine and the second vaccine that the first vaccine has no use and you have to repeat the first one again before you get the second one. Are we at danger? And what's the wisdom behind? Why not just, give person, save the rest and give the person the 2 shots close to each other at the recommended time rather than make you wait and it might wear out and lose our effect? Talk to us about that, Doc.
Yeah, well, what is good is the body is remarkable, the body's immune system. When it is exposed to a vaccine, the vaccine for the body forms a response to the vaccine, and it does not forget. It has memory cells. In forming that response, it has a way of remembering. So when that germ comes, the body recognizes it. Or if it's a vaccine, let's say in the trials that they did for the messenger RNA vaccines, they gave them either after 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So that is why, because they did it that way in the trials, that is why they said you should give it in 3 or 4 weeks. But now we based on just basic vaccinology, understanding of how the body's immune system operates, the body gets the first dose, it does not forget it. Why they wanted to give the second dose, let's say within 1 month, is because they wanted to give the body's immune system an early boost to beef up the protection you get from the first dose from, let's say, 70% right up to 90, 95%. But in fact, when you look at it, if there is the Brits worked out that it made better sense to get more people to 70% protection rather than getting half the number getting 80 or 90% protection. It was better to get a larger number of people getting that first dose. Now, at a certain point, especially among health workers and other frontline workers, they need to get their second dose because they're seeing persons with COVID every day, looking after them all day in hospital. So you need to give them as much protection as possible. But so it's a balancing act, but your body does not forget. So don't worry. They gave me an appointment for 8 weeks, but I know from the British data that my boost from, let's say, my first dose is 70% protection. If I got it at 4 weeks, I might go up to 80 or 85. If I wait for 8 weeks, it may go up to 90. If I wait for 12 weeks, it may go up to 95% or 96% or 98%. I will prefer to get my second dose in 3 months. Rather, and if it doesn't come at 3 months and I get it at 4 months, I will still get a good boost. So your body doesn't forget. But it's more important at first, when very few people are vaccinated, to get more people vaccinated with 1 dose than getting half that number with 2 doses.
Doctor, another frightening question. We're going to the matter of efficacy of the vaccine. Now, the vaccine is 70% effective. Does that mean 30% of us, it don't work for us and so we will likely to die? And are the ones who have died so far, are they in the ratio that for which the vaccine did not work? And give me a comparative evaluation of the efficacy of various vaccines. You said that we get the cheap one, that one to kill a black man, and some people have white man have some more expensive vaccine. Talk to us about the efficacy of vaccine. And
right. So when we talk about the efficacy, that is the level of effectiveness during the vaccine trial, when they're studying you very closely. But you see, a lot of different things can influence what the efficacy is. So the AstraZeneca, when they were doing their study, they did it in the UK, they did it in South Africa, they did it in Brazil. In the UK, they had a lot of health workers in it. So because you had health workers who were exposed to persons with COVID every day, the risk of them getting infected was much higher than when you did an efficacy trial in the general population. So you find for the messenger RNA vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna, they didn't have as many health workers in those trials, and the efficacy came out at 90%, 95%. Brilliant vaccines. And the AstraZeneca came out at about 70%. So people think, wait, the AstraZeneca not as good as the Pfizer or the Moderna. But the Brits have shown, the Brits are using the Pfizer and they're using the AstraZeneca. And they've given most people 1 dose. And when they track them, they track everybody going into hospital. And they find that both vaccines are 90% effective against severe COVID, about keeping people out of hospital. So now another thing is, when we say 70%, it means that some people who get the vaccine still get COVID, but the COVID that they're getting is a very mild condition. It's just like the common cold. It's not the severe COVID that puts you into hospital. So you have to look at the case definition that you're using. All the clinical trials were taking swabs of people regularly. Once they had any symptom at all, any fever, any cough, any cold, they take a swab. And if it's positive, that's COVID. So the definition was very, very sensitive. But the point is, all the vaccines are highly effective in real life in protecting you from severe COVID, so you don't go to hospital. There are very few people who get the vaccine and end up in hospital.
Well, Doc, this is where your audience, your over 235 audience is going to be standing up now to hear the real stuff, because I'm rejoicing on some information I got recently, but some persons are worried. I understand that if you're over 60, the vaccine gives you some additional lease on life as it relates to certain ability to stand up in certain department. But I understand that under 30 are very concerned because there is erectile dysfunction, and we're concerned about blood clotting, and we're talking about sterility. Speak to us about those kind of side effects: impotence, blood clot, sterility, and what else should we be concerned about?
Okay, good question. Let's calm down the men first, because they're going to get very, very nervous immediately, right? So when it comes to the impotence business, it's the COVID disease. People who have severe COVID, some of them seem to report complications with impotence after.
Erectile dysfunction.
Erectile dysfunction, right. But remember, persons who have severe COVID, it takes time for them to recover. So they can end up, they're finding that some of them end up with kidney problems, some end up with heart problems, even young persons who have severe COVID. It's not a lot of them, but so they're talking about long COVID and post-acute COVID. People who have complications from the COVID. It's not a complication of the vaccine. I want the men to hear that clearly, that the vaccine don't cause no problem like that. The vaccine may save you from that if you get COVID, because if you don't take the vaccine, you could get COVID. But the blood clots now, this is a very serious thing. Before we come to the blood clots, I'd like to just very quickly talk about the anaphylaxis, because the first...
That's a big word, though.
Sorry, my apologies. The severe allergic reactions that they found in the United States with the messenger RNA vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna, they didn't see it in the trials. The trials had 30,000, 40,000 people, and they didn't have anyone who was at risk, who had a severe allergic reaction and was at risk of cardiorespiratory collapse, where their heart stopped beating. Because this is what we mean by an anaphylaxis, where your whole system collapses, and you have to give them an adrenaline injection immediately, and antihistamine injection as well, and revive them. Luckily, no one has died from this, but they did find that persons were developing this very severe adverse reaction, which we call anaphylaxis. So now they put a warning on the Pfizer and the Moderna. Anyone who has a history of getting a severe adverse reaction causing collapse, anaphylaxis, from a vaccine or an injection in the past must not take the Moderna or the Pfizer. I just want to get that out of the way. But we have to face now the AstraZeneca. And, you know, while these vaccines are being rolled out, the medical community has to monitor really closely Are there rare side effects that could cause problems? So it was in Europe, in first, I think, Norway or Denmark, then Germany. They noticed a very unusual and very rare form of blood clotting called either cavernous or cerebral. Cerebral is the brain, and the cavernous venous sinuses. Those are just the veins draining the brain, can develop a blood clot. And it's a special type of blood clot where the platelets in the body, which is a little cell in the blood, that tends to clump together and cause the clot to block the flow of the blood. They found a cluster in a handful of primarily women who were younger in Germany. So they started investigating this thing. And what they have found is that in Germany, Europe, they were finding it. They weren't finding it as frequently in England, but they do estimate that at an average of about 5 or 6 persons for every 1,000,000 doses will get this very rare clotting situation. They can't say it definitely is caused by the vaccine, but it appears as if it is caused by the vaccine, the AstraZeneca. And just recently, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the United States, which is the one-dose vaccine, they have found 6 cases of the similar blood clot among persons. They have now vaccinated at least nearly 7 million people. So in the United States, they found this clot occurring at the rate of 1 per million doses. And in Europe, they've found it occurring at about 5 to 6 per million doses. Now, when you weigh overall the benefit of the vaccine, the protection for the vast number of persons without any problem, then the benefit of taking the vaccine clearly outweighs the risk. But once there is a possible risk, no matter how rare, how uncommon, we have to be on the alert for it, look out for it, alert the public, alert the medical fraternity that there is this possible risk. So I'm going to go on quickly to say what the signs are, because this is not the usual blood clots we are talking about. In the United States, every year among the general population, you can anticipate that the medical fraternity is going to see about 500,000 people with blood clots. In the legs, called deep vein thrombosis, where the calf of the leg swells up, is painful, and you have to put the person on a blood thinner. Most doctors have seen this, and you see it often in women, including young women, who come into your practice and just say, boy, they have a pain in the back of the calf, and you have to check it out immediately, and you put them on a blood thinner. That is one cause of common clot. Now, some other persons, usually older people, develop clots in the heart, in the lungs, and that sort of thing. So getting blood clots is very common in medicine. We see it all the time. But the clots that is associated with the AstraZeneca is not those common clots that we're talking about. In fact, when you look at the number of clots overall in persons who are vaccinated, it's actually less than what you find in the general population. But this very rare blood clot in the veins draining the brain, that appears to be a bit more common. So what are the signs? If someone gets a vaccine, usually it will appear in the first 2 weeks after you get the vaccine, maybe 3 days up to about 16 days. you get severe, persistent, severe headache and blurring of vision. Anyone with a symptom like that, you go to your doctor immediately. The other thing that some people are getting is persistent, severe pain in the belly. Again, people who get persistent, severe pain in the belly, they must seek medical attention. Those are the two main the symptoms. Some people who get the clot in the brain may also notice like what you get with a stroke, where one side of the face is weak and the other is not. But other symptoms of the clots, generally, since we're talking about clots, if a clot goes to the lung, you may have chest pain and breathlessness. And if it goes to the leg, you have pain and swelling in the calf. So I'm just sharing those symptoms, which under ordinary circumstances, people should seek the doctor immediately. And of course, if you've had any of the either AstraZeneca or the J&J vaccine in the past 2 weeks, you should definitely see a doctor immediately.
Dr. Figueroa, all 239 of us are waiting for the answer to this final question. It's a pleasure having you with us tonight. You're on Christian Hard Talk, this and every Tuesday night at the Portmore Holiness Christian Church Zoom platform right here every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. And we are speaking with the head of the Caribbean Immunization Technical Advisory Group, Professor J. Peter Figueroa. And the final question for him that all 240 of you want to hear. Flooding the room, Dr. Figueroa. More than one person asking the question. The matter of diet and vaccine. Is there a kind of diet that build and prepare the immune system to take the vaccine, prepare the system to fight against COVID before or after the vaccine, before or after COVID? Tell us the importance of diet and what specifically, whether medication or natural food stuff, ital food, or whatever the good stuff, what is it that we can take before vaccine, before COVID, after vaccine, after COVID, that will boost the immune system and make me stand in spite of whatever happens, stand in all respects and full sense of the word?
Okay, so this is a very important question, and diet is very important. When I was at medical student, I can never forget, I had a good friend who was a little older than me, and he gave me a saying that I've not forgotten. Whatsoever or whosoever is the father of a disease, the mother is poor diet. So all that is saying to me is that everybody should always pay attention to having a proper diet. Now, let me also say, regardless of what your diet is, because many of us don't stick to what we know is the best way to do something. Whatever your diet is, don't worry, you can still take the vaccine. That is not a reason not to take the vaccine. But your diet is important for your overall health. Now, a nutritionist would explain this better than me. My approach to diet is that you mustn't eat too much. And if you keep putting on weight, it means you're eating too much. You must eat a balanced meal, which means you must make sure that you get between 3 to 5, preferably up to 5 servings, small servings of vegetables and fruit a day. And you mix up the colors of your fruit and your vegetable. A lot of vegetables are green, callaloo, okra, lettuce, cabbage, chocho, anything, and all the fruits. Mix them up. Sometimes string beans, peas. So you want to mix what you have. I think in our diet in Jamaica, sometimes we take in too many sweet things in terms of sugar, syrup, aerated water. I won't bother mention the alcohol problem. Some people too much there. But also we have a tendency, I think, to eat too much starch, too much rice, too much bread,
dumpling,
the one-a-man dumpling, and you put in all 3, 4. The fried dumpling, I have a weakness for fried dumpling. But, you know, anything that is fried, you have to try and control how much fried food you have, because the oil, calorific, too much butter, margarine, calorific. So sometimes it's better to steam, bake, rather than fry. But we have to look at portion size as well, so that you know, obese. When I was a young doctor, we had so many children who were malnourished. We overcame that problem, and now we're having far too many people who are overweight. One of the most serious comorbidities across the world that is taking out people, that COVID takes out, is persons who are obese or overweight. So this is something where I think all of us could do, many of us could do better, to have smaller portion size. I'm not a big man in all sorts of these kind of diets. What I usually tell people, if they're overweight and you can lose 1 to 2 pounds a month over time, just by reducing the intake, how much you put on your plate, using a smaller plate, and just being more careful with what you're eating and ensure it is well balanced. In 12 months, you lose between 10 and 20 pounds. But even 10 pounds over 12 months is excellent, because it's not easy to lose weight. And of the increase of physical activity, you're walking, walk for pleasure, and enjoy your walking and stay active. And that is extremely important for your health, especially as you get older. So I haven't gone into a lot of detail. I'm not pinpointing any special thing. We know that we cook with ginger, which is good, especially if you're having peas, and peas is good. You cook with ginger. And there are lots of other things that people know sometimes even better than me to make the food tasty, healthy. And once you have that healthy, balanced diet, it gives you a good immune system. But that is not enough by itself to protect you from the COVID. You need to get vaccinated, and you also need to, during this period, until most of us are vaccinated, we still need to wear the mask, maintain the physical distancing, avoid the crowds indoors.
What can I tell you? There are my friends, brothers and sisters in Jamaica and the diaspora, head of the Caribbean Immunization Technical Advisory Group, Professor J. Peter Figueroa, telling you as it is. Well, he's getting paid for this, but not being paid, I hear his passion. He believes in what he's saying. The world is saying what he's saying. The entire world is saying what he's saying. That the safest way out, the safest way out is to get yourself vaccine. And of course, well, if you're kind of afraid, that's where the faith comes in. And after all, heaven is better than this. So don't worry, you know. One of my friends said everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. But this is where your faith comes in, my friends. It's not only good for you, good for everyone else. If you're not an infector, don't be a spreader. You know, it's good to take the vaccine. Looking forward to hear more on this. Send your questions in. You can mail them in also, or send us a WhatsApp at 876-989-6004. If you think we have sufficient significant questions and enough questions, we'll do part 2. If not, I think the question is answered. Dr. Figueroa has delivered. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Doctor, for delivering for us tonight. Thank you, my audience. Great audience, all 140 of you. One person got.
Can I ask a question?
We would have preferred you put it in the room, you know, but if you're sure that it is not answered as yet, we'll allow you. But Doc has exhausted time. But let me see if it's that. Go right ahead. Last one.
I was diagnosed with angina and corona infections, and I am on 2 blood thinners. I am scared of taking the. Is it okay for me to take it?
I think it will be okay for you to take it because you should speak to your doctor who knows your individual case in detail. But I don't know which thinners you're on, whether it is warfarin or Xarelto. You're not on heparin?
None of those. I'm on the aspirin and what's the other one? It is kind of a little far from where I am right now. So
okay, don't fret, but you should discuss it with your doctor. But you know, persons who are on aspirin, there shouldn't be a problem. What I would say is if you or your doctor are concerned, then it would be better for someone who is on thinners or who has a history of having had a blood clot. It would be better for you to try and get the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. I've actually advised a lady who I know to do that. We should be getting, hopefully, either the Moderna, probably the Moderna vaccine, maybe in a month or two. And the preference would be if you have any doubt. But the truth is that persons, even with a history of a blood clot, who are on aspirin or who had angina and need to be on a blood thinner, you can still take the AstraZeneca. And up to this point, none of the regulatory bodies or the safety bodies have said not to take it under those circumstances. And what you have to do too is it depends a little bit on your age. How old are you?
I'm 58.
Yes, you see, so in Europe, even where they've put out the warning that younger persons under 30, they have alternate vaccines to the AstraZeneca. They have the Pfizer and the Moderna. So in Germany, they've said persons under 30 take the Moderna or the Pfizer. We should be getting the Moderna, so you could wait a little bit and see and get that. But once you're older in England,
I also have a breathing infection, so I don't know. As you said, maybe I have to discuss with the cardiologist first.
Yes, discuss with your specialist. But quite frankly, you have significant comorbidities. You're 58, you're in the older age group. I would be inclined to take the AstraZeneca vaccine because right now we're seeing a lot of COVID in Jamaica. It's hard to keep avoiding it. You have to be very careful. So the benefit for the older person far outweighs the very rare risk. Right now, the risk is running at no more than 5 to 6 per million doses. So for older persons, definitely take the AstraZeneca vaccine when you get the opportunity.
Doc, what I'm prepared to do, she's a special case.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
Yeah, I'm gonna allow her to ask. If her doctor advises her against the present vaccine, I have your contact. I'm gonna see if you can give her a special treatment because I know they might be around on it, difficult to access. So I'll be in touch with you on her particular case.
Sure.
And if there's any other special case that the doctor says you're not to take the present one, just call 876-989-6004. We'll be happy to see what we can do to get you connected with the right one. Until next week, Tuesday. Thank you so much, Doc. Once again, I say thanks. God bless you. Again, thank you for coming to Christian Heart.
Thanks for having me. And good night to all.
Good night, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc.